Welcome to episode 3 of Paid Search NYC podcast. Very excited to be joined by Joshua Baez, who is a search strategist at an agency in New York. We originally connected because I found your Spotify and YouTube channel. Actually, when I was looking for a networking event, I found the digital marketing networking event. Noticed you'd spoken there, found your stuff online, was like, this guy's getting after it in paid search, really cool, connected. And obviously, since then, we've chatted about paid search and networking events in New York. So yeah, really excited to do this, and thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you for having me here.
Of course. I guess before we jump into it, a couple of networking events that you taught me about, actually, which sounded really interesting. I've not had a chance to check out yet, but the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce and the BNI networking event, I think, were two things you said you had gone to and gotten a lot of value from. Do you still go to those? Have you got any coming up?
Yeah, so for the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, I'm double checking. I think towards the winter, it's a little bit slower in terms of meetings. They probably do more virtual just because of the weather. But then as time goes on, we start to enter into the warmer seasons, and they start to have more in-person things. So they had, I think their last meeting was virtual. There hasn't been any in person yet as of this month, but we'll see how the events that pop up on February. And then with regards to BNI, I actually haven't been able, I've never been able to join a BNI yet, but with BNIs, I've heard from folks that I've networked with at the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and even just LinkedIn, and just kind of just searching for networking events myself. BNIs are really good because, taking a step back, BNI is an abbreviation for Business Networking International. And within each group of a BNI network, there's one person of a particular industry. So let's say that there's 5 people. There's one person who's a lawyer, one person who is in the health industry, one person who in the fitness industry, and then there's one in the digital marketing space. So if Matt and I joined one BNI group, only one of us would be able to go in there because we're both in the same industry. But yeah, it's a great networking tool. I personally haven't done it, but from folks that have done it, they've yielded a lot of positive results in networking and business opportunities, colleagues. It is more focused in on consistency, constantly showing up. Like, they do have a set time and place where you have to meet, even if it's virtually. And I believe the cost is a little bit higher than Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce, they have different tiers, and it's not they're not as strict on attendance. You can kind of go like, oh, you know what, this month I'm probably not going to go. I'll go next month. There's no penalty for that. But with BNI, you might encounter that.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, well, for anyone who's interested, as the weather gets better and it gets warmer in New York, definitely check those out because they both sound great. I like the idea that at BNI, you're the only person in that industry. So it just kind of guarantees you're not in a room full of fellow paid search people, which is always good. It has its place, but sometimes it's nice to network outside of that. So that's awesome. And then the one you spoke at, I think, was the digital marketing networking event in person. I think that's a monthly one. I think that's an Eventbrite or Meetup, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I found that one, I believe, in Eventbrite. I just typed in digital marketing NYC, just trying to figure out what are paid search or even just digital marketing, networking events in the city. And surprisingly, even though we're in Manhattan, there's not that much of them. They're maybe more on the broader sense of like tech, but not so focused in on paid search, SEO, email marketing, so that's a bummer. But I did found it in Eventbrite, and then I also found it on it came up as an ad on Facebook for me because they actually ran Facebook ads, and it came up on my algorithm, and I just got myself a ticket, went there in person, and it was a great event. The host of that event his name is Alex, and I've met him a few times. I've spoken there a few times, and there's usually the format of that networking event is that there is 2 speakers, and it's any particular subject on digital marketing. So it can be on how to improve and how to scale up in an agency, how to build a campaign, how to optimize a campaign, how to become a better freelancer. There's a wide range of topics that people bring their expertise in. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to just learn how to be better as a public speaker in that area. And then at the end of the presentation, folks in that event will then ask you questions related to the topic. And then after the two presentations, after the batch of questions, and there's time for networking where you get to connect with the folks that went there in attendance and exchange LinkedIn's or business cards, and then, just keep it going from there. So it's a solid event for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely want to try and get to one of those. What were the things you spoke about? I know we've got a subject for this episode, but I'm curious. What did you speak about when you presented there?
Yeah, I would say the most recent one that I spoke about. Well, the two that stood out that individuals really liked when I was there was the how to integrate AI into your workflow. It was just integrating with the conversations of ChatGPT, the conversations of, I think, even Sora. I don't think Sora has been released yet, but Sora is an AI feature that if you prompt it, you add in a text prompt and it creates a video for you with utilizing the text prompt. I don't think that one's released yet, but it was just kind of already thinking in terms of, as a marketer, you're already anticipating what direction AI is going in. And even though we don't have access, or even though it's not available, it's the fact that that is a conversation, and that can help with video ads, that can help with image extensions, that can help with multimedia ads or your PMax ads. And that's it's insane to see that evolve. And another presentation that I talked about was how to stay current, or how to stay on top of like your digital marketing expertise or your skill set. And it's networking with people, like talking to guys like Matt, right? Connecting with them on LinkedIn and going to their events and seeing people in person that you may not see at your agency. Instead of just going home after work, you're taking a little bit of time out of your day to talk to people, to see what other ideas and other things that they've encountered. Even on LinkedIn itself, I think there's a huge community of people who are posting a lot, and that's awesome to see. Looking into search engine land, like looking into articles that talk about occurring events, even though whatever subject they're talking about might not pertain to your specific account, it still helps you to understand the landscape that you're in. Because Matt knows it as much as me. It's constantly changing. It is constantly evolving every few months, and there's always a new campaign type, a new match type probably in the future, and a new way to optimize. So it's always there's always a new challenge, and it's always evolving. And it's important for you to stay on top of that to just be a strong marketer overall.
Yeah, makes sense. Would love to chat more about those presentations you did, and maybe go deep on one of those in the future. But what you just said there about match types is a nice segue into the kind of thing we wanted to go a bit deep on today, which is actually, how do you approach match types right now? You've got exact, you've got phrase, you've got broad. Sure, we've got potentially search max coming soon, but we don't know when. We don't know exactly what that looks like. But right now, with the match types we have, how do you approach those match types, and kind of how does that differ by advertiser, and kind of what are the different things that are different by advertisers that might change how you approach those match types?
Yeah. I think when it comes to match types, I think the mindset and the strategy is, as an advertiser, you should be thinking about how match types fit in with your campaign goals, your budget, as well as the audience that you're trying to capture, and just the lifespan of the account. Is it a brand new account? Is this a brand new campaign? Is this an existing campaign? So that kind of gives you a bit of guidance into understanding what direction you should be going in when it comes to match types. And for folks who might not know exactly what these match types are, currently within Google and Microsoft, there's three. There's exact match, there's phrase match, and there's broad match. And it's actually really what they sound like. Exact match keywords are intent for focusing on individuals who type in that exact keyword. So take the example of a Nike sneaker or a high top sneaker, right? You add that keyword into your Google Ads campaign, and that ad will trigger. Phrase match is much more of those who type in the types of phrases of that keyword. So it can be a Nike or a blue Nike high top sneaker or a orange high top Nike sneaker. It's still capturing that demand because it's still a phrase. It's still kind of similar. And then abroad, it's much more of like Nike shoes, right? You're trying to capture a wider audience. You're trying to capture folks that might not necessarily know the exact product or service, but they are in the realm of that space and they're able to capture that. So with that in mind, going back to how an advertiser should think of is that's how you should approach your strategy. If it's a net new campaign, you should probably incorporate broad match in there. Start off with broad match, seeing what's the interest in there, right? You're going into your keyword planner, you're cross-referencing that with the products and services that your client offers. You're seeing what are high intent search keywords. You're doing research on your own of just the product a little bit, and then you start to integrate that. When you do this method, you really just want to make sure that your search terms are in a good place. So you want to frequently check your search terms. And for folks who don't know what search terms are, they're essentially the terms or keywords that individuals type in on search engines that your ads come up in. So you just want to make sure that your search terms are aligned with your keywords. And if they're not, you can negate them. And if they are, and if they're really good, right, you might have a search term that might have generated 5, 10, 15 conversions at a low CPA, a low CPC. You're like, you know what, this is a term I can add on, and you can start doing that. And then for phrase, for me personally, I have within the accounts that I'm currently working on right now, we don't use phrase. I've worked on accounts where we've used phrase in the past, and I've seen benefits there. And then with exact, we would typically use that more for those high ticket items, or it might be very competitive. It might be from a brand perspective, and we can touch more on that when it comes to segmenting brand and non-brand a little bit later. But that's kind of the idea there, right? It's just seeing what do you currently have. If you're an advertiser, what structure does your current client have? Is it working? And if it is, okay, cool. How can we improve this? How can we get this to work even better? And if it's not, what are adjustments that I need to make? And if it's a brand new Google Ads campaign, then I would start off more from a broad perspective and just get that traffic going in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting that the points on a brand new account going broad, and it makes sense because the speed at which you're able to learn, gather data, see what's working is faster, and so you start broad and you refine. So that makes sense. The point on phrase, it feels like the writing's on the wall for phrase.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the things in 2025 that disappears. And then your point on exact, like having that control maybe for high volume, high value terms, that's pretty interesting because I think part of the journey we've been on with the paid search is very much consolidation, lean into broad. But do you find there's still a space for that kind of control for exact terms where they are really high volume? Like, do you split those out? How does that look?
Yeah, we would do. Currently, the structure that I'm working with is using both broad and exact. Those, and then not utilizing phrase. Phrase is used mainly we use phrase more in Microsoft, and we've seen benefits there incorporating that. But when it came to the Google side of it, and if we were to pull a report any time frame, 30 days, a month, 2-3 months, we would see that out of the 3 match types, phrase would be the lowest in terms of conversions from us on our end, and then more on a higher CPA level. Broad and exact had a much more benefit, and I was like, let's stick to that, right? It's working for us. We're seeing a lot of benefits. We're saving dollars here. I mean, it's efficient from a cost perspective, and it's also efficient from a CPA perspective from us.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you touched a little bit about brand and non-brand, the differences there. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think how my thought process on that is making sure that they live in 2 separate campaigns, right? Like a brand campaign is a campaign that should be structured to people who already know your product and service, right? So this can help you build trust. This can help you build authority, making sure that you take up the retail space. I know people like using that term when it comes to on the search engine results page. We can stick to the Nike product. You're using Nike keywords on your search, in your keyword structures within your campaigns for your branded campaigns. So whenever someone types it up, your ad is the first thing that comes up, and then hopefully your SEO is in a good spot too. Your websites are there, your links and everything there is coming up as well, taking up as much retail space on that search engine results page. And also it's just bumping off competitors, more of like it's just insurance. And then you can also leverage that when it comes to specific products that you're offering. Right, you might have a holiday sale, or there might be a big incentive on possibly integrating, or if you click on this ad you get 20% off, or if you click on this ad, a $300 bonus. It's just, you can also offer an incentive and highlight your unique selling propositions, kind of separating yourself from your competitors and showing that you're an authoritative brand or a company in there. And then when it comes to non-brand, the thought process there is capturing folks who might not necessarily know the brand and company name, but they do know they want to have that particular product, or they're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to figure out, they are trying to maybe open up a Roth, for example. You might have a client that's much more on the financial vertical. You're trying to open up a Roth. You don't know which one to open. You don't know that there's specific names. So you're just typing in Roth, and then you come up there, right? Your company, your brand, your keywords come up for that term, and the interest is already there. You're not trying to generate interest in someone. The interest is there. You're just putting the ad on that person that's looking for that already, and solving their problem. So that's kind of the philosophy that I have there. Brand is for folks who know your brand and just kind of putting yourself in that authority, on that authoritative position. Non-brand leans more onto people who do not know your brand by name, but they do want to purchase your product and or service.
Yeah, it makes sense. How does it work from like a match type perspective in non-brand? I guess if you're incorporating broad and exact, one of the issues, you kind of touched on it, is like the search terms. And a lot of people talk about, broad and non-brand, depending on your vertical, can get, there can be some interesting search terms that come through.
Yeah.
So I guess what's your experience of that, and kind of how do you tackle that?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to it from a brand and non-brand perspective, I'll start off with brand first. When it comes to search terms within our branded campaigns, that's something that I've never encountered where there's things we would have to negate. Maybe we would negate services that we're really not trying to target. So like that would be one instance. There might be or a product that isn't available anymore that they might have took off the market. And so we'll just ensure that folks who do know the brand and that product or service don't have that ad come in, because that's just going to be a low click-through rate. It's going to just be, you're just going to spend a lot of dollars there because they're looking for a particular product or service that just doesn't exist, or it needs to be updated or anything like that. So that would be much more on the search term side. And then for non-brand, I would say there has to be a bit more intention on just checking in on your search terms. I've seen instances where, you might be serving, a competitor might come up. Like they might know a brand of another competitor, but they might not type that competitor's name. They just type in the product or service that they want, and your ad comes up. So there might be that instance there, but that at the same time, that might garner new opportunities of, hey, you know what? Does a competitor campaign make sense? Are you in the position? Do you have the risk tolerance to take that on of, a higher CPC campaign or a higher CPA to yield results? There might be competitors coming through on your search terms and you're seeing 20, 30 conversions. You're like, hey, you know what? This is a good thing to test. You can bring that up with your client. And then obviously there's times where it's just completely, it doesn't make sense for you to have other search terms that just are completely irrelevant. And, you're seeing a whole lot of 10, 20 thousands of impressions come in there. So you just want to add that into your negative keyword list real quick before your supervisor, gives you a quick ping on Teams.
Yeah, definitely can relate to that. Having done this for quite a few years. Yeah, that makes sense. I think one thing that I think that kind of highlights is just the importance of understanding the client's business, because if you don't have that full context, full appreciation for the products and services, then you might miss some of the nuances when you're looking at search terms. And like you said, there might be certain products or services that they just don't completely offer, or there might be some that are kind of in a gray area, or they could be new products and services. So just really understanding your sort of client's business. And we get questions on this occasionally, like how do you do that, like as a paid search person? I think a lot of it is just immersion sessions, getting close with the client, doing face-to-face stuff where you can. But yeah, I think just to have an appreciation for the need to get a really deep understanding of your client's business to be good at paid search.
Agreed. Yeah. It's that, and then a mixture of strong fundamentals. I think if you have the strong fundamentals and you know your client's business, you'll be a very strong strategist or supervisor, director, freelancer, business owner. Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess one thing that does throw a bit of a wrench in the mix is Performance Max. So you've got a great structure when it comes to exact and broad, maybe a bit of phrase in there, and you're pretty happy with your search term review process. You're doing that weekly, and then you throw a Performance Max campaign. How does that then work in the mix in terms of your search term approach, and maybe what are the common questions you might get from clients, and like, well, how does that change how we think about match types?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think now Performance Max is something that's growing, and it's something that Google is definitely pushing out. And I definitely see this being something bigger in 2025 somewhere along the line, and maybe Q3, Q4. But for PMax, it's just first having that conversation with your client and having that, allowing them to understand it. Well, sometimes your client might have search understanding and sometimes they don't, right? So it's just giving them that context of what Performance Max is, how does it work, how does that work within the business and the structure that you currently have. For me, I've had experience with Performance Max for one client account, and that was a conversation. It was initially having that discussion of what it does and what that will do for us, opening up a new portal for us in terms of making sure that we're showing up within searches under like images and video, because that specific account was much more structured on text search, just regular search. And it was something that we were planning on expanding, right? And there's demand gen as well that you can integrate in there. But for PMax, we were thinking, this is something that we can test, and we have the risk tolerance to test it. We have the budget to test it, where the client is open and willing to test it. So I think that's really important, is just making sure that the client is good on that, and they're clear on what the goal is for this, and there is the budget that's there for it, in case, when you conduct tests, you're opening yourself up to possibly the test isn't working. That's part of what we do, is just finding the answer. You're putting all the best practices in there. You're using your critical thinking skills, your strong skill set. Sometimes it might not work, but you still are, you're just adding those things in the mix, so it does work well. But for us, how we use PMax is we use it alongside our traditional search campaigns. And the one thing that our rep mentioned for us is that when it comes to branded terms, it may or may not conflict with our branded campaigns, because I forgot how they mentioned it, but it was something along the lines of like it can kind of like cannibalize each other. We didn't experience that. We actually experienced that with our demand gen campaign. Once we launched PMax, our demand gen campaign started to suffer a little bit. So once we turned off and paused our demand gen campaigns, then our PMax campaign really flourished. And I think it looked like they were competing, because literally the moment that we launched it, the following weeks, we're not seeing demand gen how it was before we launched that. And then once we integrated that, it worked really well. But it's great. We've seen it work well because it allows you to have multiple touch points across within the customer journey, right? Your people that are actively searching for the term, whether it's they know your business or they don't, they know your product or service, as well as within video format. picture formats. There's multiple ways where your ads are being reached, because now in the space that we're in 2025 and beyond, we search multiple different ways. We search our answers through YouTube. We search our answers through TikTok, right? The younger generation, TikTok is unbanned, I think, so that's good. But the younger generations have been utilizing TikTok much more from a search feature. I kind of use YouTube myself to kind of do a bit of research when it looks at reviews and things. So seeing an ad come up, okay, like I may or may not click on that. So it's just kind of, I like to think of PMax as a fisherman with multiple fishing hooks in a river, right? If you just have one, the opportunities of you catching a fish, it's good, depending on your position. Your positioning is really important. But if you have 3, 4, 5 different hooks in the water, you're definitely going to you'll start seeing some results, and you'll start catching fish. But yeah, that's kind of how I think of Performance Max.
Nice. Yeah. I love that analogy at the end. It's always good to use things like that to help explain these products sometimes, because they can get quite complicated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that. I think a couple of things you said there, the critical thinking part, like with these products, it can be really difficult to fully understand what's going on. So being able to take a step back and say, what can and I can't influence here? Like, what do I have control over? How do I set this up in a way where I can be confident of the impact, the incrementality, but that's rooted in like that ability to have a critical thinking, essentially. And then the other thing on Performance Max and demand gen and overlapping and kind of turning demand gen on and seeing Performance Max suffer is really interesting, because I don't think I've heard of that before. Makes sense because they have similar access to inventory in terms of YouTube that you mentioned. But I think everyone assumes that Performance Max, most of it is like, well, a lot of it is search, like it's branded search. If that is being cannibalized, it's non-brand search. So the fact that you've turned demand gen on, Performance Max has suffered, maybe indicates that Performance Max was leaning into that other YouTube inventory than you might otherwise assume, which is kind of cool, because I think that's a big unlock for advertisers right now, is just being okay with leaning into these different inventory types, and having the right creative is really important. But yeah, I think for 2025, I see a lot of opportunity for advertisers in leaning into these other inventory types. So getting an understanding of how these different campaigns play with each other when it comes to inventory is, really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I think we've covered so much there, and would want to dive into a number of different things there. But I guess just to summarize, we had so SQRs, got to do search query reports, really important. If you're launching a new account, Broad's a good way to start, at least to speed up and get those learnings. Phrase, you mentioned Phrase on Bing being better than Google in your experience. Did I remember that rightly?
Yep.
Yeah,
correct.
Cool.
Yep.
That's a good one. What else do we have? Yeah, PMax demand gen relationship, keeping a close eye on that. I feel like I'm missing one.
Brand and non-brand.
Brand and non-brand, yeah. Understanding the role of brand and non-brand. Yeah, super useful. I would love to spend some time going deep on those, and actually even getting you to do one of the presentations you did at that networking event. The AI one sounds really interesting. So hopefully we can do something like this again in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I appreciate you for having me on again, and I appreciate you for even starting that networking event, because literally we would have never met had you never taken the initiative to start that. So, but yeah, I'm really excited to just continuing to have more of these videos, and I have no problem being a guest here for as long as you want me here. We could do 20,000 episodes if you want, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, look forward to it. Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.
Cheers.